the whole thing looks depressing. And then you take off, and at a certain moment, you break through the clouds, and suddenly it's a beautiful, brilliant, bright day,
Yeah.
just on the other
Yeah.
side of those clouds.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of makes you realize, like, oh, the sun is always shining. It's always bright. It's always luminous. I just occasionally find myself underneath the clouds,
Mm-hmm.
right? And just being reminded of that as you rise above the clouds is an interesting experience, and it is something that gives us the capacity to realize that my emotions are like these clouds that float by one moment and then they're gone, or that I can intentionally rise above at any moment because the sun of the soul is always shining. It's just that we're not facing it. We're looking at the mind instead, you know. But the
Right.
sun of the soul, the brilliance of the soul, the luminosity of the soul, the warmth of the soul, our true nature is always there. We are just not focused on it. We learn to become focused on it by one, tolerating the shifts in matter, even the emotional shifts that are tied to the shifts in matter. When in one sense we have to learn to not grant them the importance that we grant them. To us it's everything. Our emotions are everything. But when we say those emotions are not me, those emotions are shifts in the mind that are tied to shifts in the external matter, and they
Mm.
are not me. That's the beginning of spiritual progress. That's the
Mm.
beginning of yoga, right? That's the start.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Live from New York City's Upper West Side, this is Wisdom of the Sages, a daily spiritual podcast. Today I'm your host, Kaustubha, with special guest co-host Kishori Gopi.
Hi, Bolt.
Hi, there she is. Good
Mm.
morning, Kishori. Raghunath Prabhu is on the road. He's on the road with his band, Shelter, and they're touring Europe right now. We have the driver. We can see the driver right now. Where did he go?
He's
Road
looking
rage.
suave in a Sprinter.
Torananda is driving the van. They got like some kind of big van they got over there.
I
It's
think
not.
it's a Sprinter van.
What is a Sprinter?
I think it's like a Mercedes big Sprinter van. They're like really tall
Yeah,
ceilings.
it's more
They're
than
really
just a
cool.
van. It's a kind of a mini bus almost
Yeah.
practically. Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's
Mhm.
like in Europe they got all nice cars and
They're
everything.
nice. Yeah.
So like it's Mercedes. The things like yeah.
Raghu rides in style.
Apparently he does. Apparently he does. Okay. So we wish them all the best. Ruggle will be back on
Yeah.
Thursday. And why don't we jump into the announcements? First announcement is that we're going to be having the show tomorrow and Wednesday. You never know. Maybe I'll take Wednesday off, but I think we'll probably do it Wednesday as well. Um,
Okay.
I'm tell you, Kishore, I'm getting into writing now. I'm hitting a pace now. And
Wow.
these
That's
past
exciting to hear.
Yeah, in these past few days, because there was no show, I was really had a strong
You wrote.
momentum going. Today I did get some work done, but you never know. So I might take some days off every now and then just to
Okay.
get that going. But
Do you have a
hope
deadline? Do you have a deadline for your book, or have you, or a self-set
just my
deadline?
own, just my own. Definitely this year it's got to be done. But I got a pace now, and I'm feeling good about it. That you never know, maybe I can get the first draft done on by the end of the summer. That would be really good if I could. So
That'd
let's
be
see.
amazing.
Let's not talk about
Okay.
it too much. We don't want to talk. The more you talk about it, I
Put a
might
little
curse.
bit of pressure on
I
you to finish
curse
that book.
myself by doing that. But in any case, yeah, maybe I take Wednesday off. We'll let you all know about that tomorrow. But tomorrow we're definitely here at 7 a.m. I also want to announce that Sage Group signups are filling up. Now's the time to sign up if you want to. And they've opened it up now that if people want to sign up for 2 stage groups, because a lot of people
Mhm.
like to do that actually, they want to sign, they want twice a week to connect. So you got 2 different groups. It means you make about like 14 new friends. that have an interest in bhakti, and it means that for an hour and a half twice a week, you can get together with those friends and discuss and share. So sign up. You go to wisdomofthesages.com. You click on Sage Groups, and you find the group that's got some opening, group that you would like to connect with, a group that's at a time that works for you, and you join up a Sage Group, and your spiritual life just comes to the next level. Right?
They're so powerful.
Yeah. Okay. So let us now move on to today's a Q&A day, question and answer day. As a matter of fact, I think today, tomorrow, and even if we do Wednesday, they may all be Q&A days.
We have a lot of questions stacked up.
Yeah. Well, there's this. We may take one question from. We'll see if we get to it today. But when I was in Rishikesh for a month, for late February into mid to late. It was February 20th to March 20th. I was in Rishikesh, and every night at the Kirtan Fest, I did a Q&A booth, and there'd be we'd lay out about 20 seats, and you'd get about 20 people sitting down, and then you get all kind of other people kind of crowded around too. And I just did Q&A every night. But I met a person named Akshay, and he always had nice questions. And on the last night, he's like, "Well, I have a lot of questions," and I was like, "Well, I gotta go now." I said, "Write them down and send them to us, and we'll take them on the show." He sent me a list of 81 questions.
Oh my God. So earnest.
Yeah,
wow.
we may dedicate a day or two just to Akshay's questions, because they're good questions too. So maybe we'll take one of his questions today, but we definitely have a lot of questions.
Okay.
And I was thinking that now that we hit the Ramayana part of the Srimad Bhagavatam, it's all about Lord Ram, and it's kind of like a mini Ramayana. And Raghunath has such a love for Ramayana that maybe
we'll
just do Q&A until he comes back.
That's
so
amazing.
Let's see.
Yeah, I had a dream that I was in Rishikesh last
you?
night, and Radha Swami was there. You were there. Raghu was there, and we were sitting around the river, and you were answering questions. So that's interesting.
Get out! I was answering questions in front of Radha-swami. I don't feel good about that.
He was also answering questions, but he
Okay.
was deferring to you as well to answer questions.
And you saw Radha-swami this weekend. Okay, tell me about it.
Yes. We went Shami Frost, and I went down on Friday to Happy Jack's final, thesis presentation at the Harvard Divinity School.
So to clarify that, Happy Jack is one of our listeners, and he's a student at Harvard Divinity School under the revered Professor Francis Clooney,
who also spoke.
So he arranged a whole month long of lectures, of which Raghunath and I took part. Those are online, and then it culminated in this past weekend. Was it on Saturday?
Yeah, it was on Friday, and somehow Shami Pras and I were also asked to share in those presentations. I think that's through your association and being friends with Jack. So he had mentioned Radhanath Swami will be there the last day. Do you want to come? I'm like, yes, secure our seats. So Jack shared first and spoke, and because it was like his final project, if you will. It was his thesis. And so it was his
thesis, essentially. Yeah.
It was his thesis. Instead of writing a 50, 90, or I don't know how many page paper, he did this project, and he shared. I was crying listening to Jack share. I mean, he has an amazing story, and what led him to Harvard Divinity School was really inspiring, and so happy and proud of him, and from a friend peer perspective. And the room was filled, and Timothy Tucker and Lady Kate were there, and some other Wisdom of the Sagers, and lots of people that I had seen at GEV. It was like a homecoming.
I think Tim O'Reilly was there.
So, yeah. And then Radhanath Swami spoke, and so did the professor Francis Clooney. Yeah. And they answered some questions. It was really powerful. And that was at Harvard. And then the next day, had some more time in association with Radhanath Swami and disciples, and then the Boston Temple was doing a program, but there wasn't enough space in the temple. As you were the president of the Boston Temple
for a little while.
You were the president.
Boston Temple.
So maybe you would have made a similar decision to move it to MIT. So I was like, wow, we were at Harvard and MIT this weekend. And Maharaj was speaking about how I'm sitting here at MIT, and I don't know much about science and technology, but Prabhupada came and I'm here to share the science and technology of the soul.
Right.
And he's a tidal wave. I said this to him. Whenever I speak to him, I'm like, I just, appreciations pour out. And I'm like, not thinking straight. It's just being in his presence is just nectar. And he's like a tidal wave of grace and compassion. He's so tolerant. There's like hundreds of people wanting to talk to him, and he just takes time with every single one and doesn't eat, and he's tired. And I feel like
I've
I
seen
want
him.
to mother him. I'm like, are you okay?
No, there's something about him that one thing I've learned about him. He was a person that when he was like 19 years old, he went and lived with the yogis. In other words, that means
Yeah.
you have this capacity for enduring austerity, pain,
Mm,
you know. And although he
I
gave up that
remember.
life of living in caves and sleeping on the banks of rivers, I see him live the life of austerity in another way, where he
Mm,
travels constantly and he does programs and he'll stay up late and he'll take questions, hours and hours and hours, and it can be very draining, but he sees it as his service, and he endures a
yeah.
lot. And I've seen that many, 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 many times. Yeah.
It's so incredible. It is. And um, yeah. And then Timothy Tucker had mentioned, oh, I wish I spoke to Maharaj on Friday. And so I saw he was like leaving on Saturday. I said, come here, come meet him. So he came over, and Maharaj came over and met his whole family
Oh,
and
that's
and
great.
touched little Sadie's head. And it was a really beautiful moment.
Sometimes he
Yeah.
gives them the little kind of sprinkle
Yeah.
touch, or he
Yeah, he
gives them the
does that.
bonk. He does both.
I saw him do both this weekend. I don't know if he bonked or sprinkle touched Sadie. I saw him sprinkling other little. I was like, oh, if only I was a little girl to get this.
Sometimes someone your age might get the bonk. He does it
Yeah,
that way,
yeah,
but he doesn't do it as much as he used to, I think. Okay. Anyway, wonderful that you got the chance to spend time with Radha. So I want congratulations to Happy Jack in completing
yeah.
his work at Harvard Divinity School. Great to see
Monumental.
Wisdom of Sage's family, progressing and doing dynamic things with their life. And now we're ready to get into the Q&A. You ready, Kishore?
I'm ready. I'm
So why don't you
ready.
read us our first question?
Okay. Our first question is from Donal. Do you think
I think it's
Donal?
Donal.
Donal. Donal
Donal.
McCann.
Donal McCann.
Donal
Irishman.
McCann. Irish, my heritage.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna, Raghunath and Kaustubha. Just to quickly introduce myself, my name is Donal, and I live in Northern Ireland. I've been attending the ISKCON Temple in Belfast for about 3 years.
Okay.
I've just finished listening to one of your recent Q&A podcasts about staying or leaving bhakti and whether bhakti requires renunciation. Although I have not faced the same issues as that person, it did raise some feeling inside me that I felt the need to reach out.
Okay.
I grew up Catholic and was actually very devout growing up until about 20 years old.
Okay.
I would attend mass, daily mass in the summer holidays, and was heavily considering the seminary.
Yeah, most teenagers don't do that. Spend their summer going to church every day.
No,
Okay.
that is devout. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. So you could say spirituality was something I've always been passionate about, certainly.
Mhm.
This all came to an abrupt end in 2005 when my mom, a police officer, was killed on duty.
Oh,
Hmm. I became
condolences.
very angry with God and eventually fell away from him and the church. I eventually became a police officer myself. Wow. A career which has really seen me hit almost rock bottom with all the things I've seen happen in the world and the tragedy people inflict on each other.
Mm.
In 2018, I started to climb my way from the bottom and started to feel a real urge to dig deeper into myself and explore spirituality again. However, I didn't go back to the Catholic Church for this, as the politics of the Church slash Vatican really bothered me. I explored the Eastern religions, first brought about by podcasters such as Jay Shetty and YouTube videos from Sadhguru. I continued my journey and started to try different religions and practices to see if any felt right, such as Buddhism. However, nothing felt right.
Okay.
I then discovered and read, dun dun dun, Radhanath Swami's book, The Journey Home, and followed up with The Journey Within.
Okay.
I felt a connection to his journey and seeking out a practice that felt right for him. Through his books, I discovered bhakti, and to my surprise, I found a temple close by Belfast. I attended the temple, and the first evening there, I had felt I had found a home. The kirtan, the teachings, the devotees, everything felt right and whole. I felt like I had found my place and have continued ever since that night in 2022. I have studied Bhagavad-gītā and many of Srila Prabhupada's books, working my way up to 16 daily rounds and trying my best to honor the regulative principles. Progress, not perfection, I think is the phrase you used.
Okay.
My attendance at the temple is a bit few far between given my schedule with my job, but I do my best. I have attended some retreats in Krishna Island and also a 3-day retreat which was hosted by His Holiness H.B. Keshava Swami.
SB Keshava Swami.
S.B. Keshava Swami and H.G. Gaurangadas. This was exceptional and felt so perfect being there.
In Ireland, there's a whole island.
I was gonna say, what is Krishna Island?
Yeah, there's a devotees own an island, and they have like a temple out there.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible. Anyway, getting to the crux of my question/issue. My partner is not involved in bhakti or any religion, and my kids aren't either. My partner does support me, and there are no issues there. My kids have attended some festivals with me and have seemed curious, however, with the vast cultural difference between the devotees who are predominantly Indian. They seem to be not so interested. It's more like a chore for them when I ask them about coming with me to other events. I feel like they see the difference as too much, too different from what they know at school, etc. I want them to grow up and know God and have God the center of everything they do, but I want them to do it in a way they feel comfortable in learning and excited to attend. In many of Srila Prabhupada's books, especially the commentary between Western journalists or even members of Catholic clergy, I've seen that he never said that Krishna consciousness is the only way, but rather learn to love God and obey him, whether that is in Christianity or Hinduism. Thanks to Bhakti, I've really learned to love God and have found deep connection through service and daily practice. Reflecting on my time growing up as a Catholic, although I went through the practice and said the rosary, it seemed that it was action without thought or meaning. Now I feel that I truly love God, and those Christian practices could have been done with pure devotion, not just because I had to. I have a feeling now that for my kids to grow up with God at their center, they need religion. And I have a dilemma that I feel the only way to start is by bringing them to the Catholic Church to learn about God. I would still ensure through my own learning that I teach them to love God, not just the Catholic Church, and teach them about service and sacrifice. I have a feeling that it may make our family more God-centered as a whole, rather than just me. I want them to face this materialistic world with the view that material things are not the answer. Any thoughts on this would be helpful. Hopefully you can understand where I am coming from, and I appreciate all the work you do through podcasts and all of your work. Donald.
Okay.
Donald.
Okay, thank you, Donald, for that question and for explaining so much about your life and what you're going through. I'm glad that the podcast is helping you. It's wonderful that Radha Swami's books spoke to you in that way, and that you have a temple in your area that you feel like it's a home for you. That's all great. The challenge in your life apparently is that the enthusiasm that you feel for the bhakti related events in your area don't appeal to your children as much as you wish they would, I suppose. And so I never had kids, and so
Me neither.
yeah, and so in some ways, Raghunath has more experience in this in what it means and the challenges of it, but I do get to witness it a lot, and I do interact with kids as well. I appreciate your sensitivity, because if you mentioned that that from your perception, it seems that when you invite your kids to one of these events, that for them it seems like a chore. And if you were to go and force them to attend something that feels like a chore, then what that will most likely do is instill a resistance towards it, an inner resistance, not just towards the event, but towards bhakti itself, right? Because they'll identify bhakti with an event that they feel not only it bores them, but also is forced upon them And so naturally you begin to build walls of resistance against that. So your sensitivity towards that is really important. Now you're saying that along with that, you still want them to have spirituality in your life, and it seems that Catholicism may be the answer for them. So I'm assuming that there are Catholic events in your area that your kids find more interesting or more appealing in some way. And if that is the case, then I don't see any harm in that. And you went out and you kind of laid out that you've read that Srila Prabhupada, in his interviews, he would say things, and you're right about this, like, it's not so much a question of what religion you choose, or we're not trying to switch people from one religion to another, but what we're trying to get people to do is to learn how to follow them in such a way where they actually develop the you could say it in a yogic way, the levels of awareness or consciousness, or you could say it in a more devotional way, like that they actually develop love for God. If you can do that in any religion, then Prabhupada would say, then that's perfect, right? And so, yeah, if we're going to think broadly here, then sure, if by attending Catholic events your kids are feeling a connection to God, if they're feeling, if they're getting the kind of realizations that we would hope that they would get through Krishna Bhakti, for instance, if they get the realization that I'm getting it, that the material things of this world don't truly satisfy, and that there's something deeper and spiritual and meaningful in connecting with God, then if the bhakti events, the Krishna Bhakti events, they're not getting that, and in the Catholic events they are getting that, well, then that's good. Then let them develop it that way. And I like what you shared, that you will continue to share with them different ideas. This is where I always felt like, and in some of my exchanges with kids, I've been able to do this, but I understand that as a parent, it's a whole nother thing. And it can be very challenging. And of course, it depends on the child and their age and so on. But to me, I've always felt like it would be fun to kind of try to frame Krishna consciousness for children in ways that they can understand it. I used to host school kids at the Bhakti Center, and I developed a little slideshow for that. And
I love that slideshow.
you've
I
seen
have
it,
it.
yeah?
Yeah,
Okay, good,
I like have it saved on my computer.
yeah, a
'Cause
lot of people,
helpful for adults,
a
especially
lot of people
new to
said, "Oh, this is
bhakti.
just what I need to explain it to my family, or or explain it myself."
Yeah.
Yeah, so it just kind of brought, it kind of brought them through like these simple ideas, just explaining the most simple ideas, like, okay, this tradition comes from these sages that lived in the forest and they wrote down their deep spiritual meditations in these books. And it begins by understanding that the body is just, a machine, and we are a spark of spiritual energy within the machine. And when the machine dies, the spark continues to live on because the spark is eternal. And the nature of that spark, the nature of each of us, is that we all are by nature, we're eternal, we're full of knowledge, and we're full of bliss. But the problem is that we can lose touch with that feeling when our mind becomes absorbed in other ways. And when we lose touch with our inner nature, sometimes our mind becomes clouded with all kind of other ideas and other kind of desires and so on. And that can lead to different types of frustration and depression and anger and so on. And yoga is a way to get back to get control of our own mind and get back to feeling our true nature, which is underneath. And kids can follow this and be like, oh, okay. There are little illustrations with it, and they're putting together. That spark of life is in every living being, whether it's all human beings, but it's also even in the animals and even in the plants. And now here we get to the part where you might have to share with your children, the Catholics, there's certain things that the Catholics agree with, other religions like the one that I follow, Krishna consciousness or Krishna Bhakti. Catholic, we agree on so much, but there's certain places where we don't agree, or at least where they don't speak about these things, which has to do with like the idea that the soul, can take birth in another body, So you could explain to them that, yeah, what I practice is in so many ways just like what Jesus was teaching. And you can show them by quoting from the New Testament. But you can say, but here also, there's an idea that we live, that when we die, if we haven't fully developed love for God, that we take birth again, and then we get a chance to try again and improve and evolve still more. So you can discuss reincarnation, and you can discuss yoga, that they had techniques, and these techniques were used to help uncover that nature, right? So it's not just like it is, in a sense, it's religion because it has to do with reconnecting with God, but you can also see it as yoga, like as a practice that one does, that in a practical way, that we can understand how the mind works, and we can do spiritual practices to bring our mind to God, whether it's through ritual. We see in the Catholic Church they have ritual. When I was young, they never explained to me what the rituals meant and how they work. And
Yeah.
that's part of the reason why I got into the Krishna thing, because I could see, I see what the rituals mean and how they're meant to transform my mind, how they're meant to elevate my mind, to reshape my mind. And so I think if going to Catholic events helps your children develop their faith in God, but and if you deal with them in a very open way, and give them the space that they need, but also share what's unique about your own faith with them in a very rational way, then given time, it may begin to appeal to them, and on their own, they may want to pursue Krishna conscious events like that. So
Mm.
I think you're right in how you're handling it. I don't think there's a fear. Of course, things always depend on the community where you are. Like there are Krishna temples in some places where I would feel right at home, and it's like these are the best people. And there are other, I'll be honest, there are other, even ISKCON temple, Krishna communities where I feel less at home.
Hmm.
I feel
I
less part
agree.
of it. Yeah, so I kind of respect it, but it's not so much for me. I wouldn't be inclined to attend. Maybe I feel the people have a different mood, or maybe
Hmm.
I just feel the way that they present things and have programs doesn't do a lot for me. So I might just kind of respect it, but not be inclined to attend. So where you are, see how that Catholic community, if your kids continue to relate to it, if you think it's healthy for them, if you are sharing ideas of Krishna Bhakti with them, the Catholic people may or may not be able to accommodate that.
Mm.
They may come forward with more narrow ideas, and they may try to impose that on your kids. And for all we know, that may be what impels them to turn to Krishna Bhakti.
Right.
You know?
Right.
But what are your thoughts, Kishori Gopi?
Yeah, I really appreciate what you shared here, Kaustubha. And a couple of things that came to mind. One was this on Friday, right? Radhanath Swami spoke, and so did the professor, who is also a Catholic priest.
No,
He's a
right?
Catholic priest of
Yeah.
like 50 years.
Yeah, there you
And
go. Right. Just this weekend we had that Francis Clooney he's a Catholic priest.
yeah.
He's the dean of Harvard Divinity School, Catholic priest,
Mhm.
but also his field of expertise is actually Vaishnavism, is actually Krishna
Mhm.
Bhakti and Vishnu Bhakti.
Yeah, and the connection between Hinduism and Catholicism. He has a
Right.
book. He has a book about that as well. And he was sharing, like right down the hallway, I teach a Bhagavad-gītā class. And I also teach a class on Hindu goddesses and the Mother Mary.
Right.
So I was reflecting on how we can find these connections or differences in whatever we look at,
Yes.
right? Whether it's a religion or whatever it is, or an ethnicity and such. And that something that really struck me the first time I met Radhanath Swami in 2020 at Govardhan Eco Village, he said, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, like, I'm not attached to what you call God, whether that is God or Krishna or Radha or Jesus or Buddha or Allah or Mother Nature. I'm here to help you find that your connection to God
Hmm.
and your reconnection to God. And that ultimately, right, he was saying this weekend that Bhakti is really simple, and yet there are complexities, right? And that goes with any religion or any part of our even material life, that we can look at it in both ways. And at its simplest form, Bhakti is to love and be loved, and then be an instrument of that love. And so that isn't bound by one religion or another,
Right.
right? And I was raised Catholic, and you were too,
Yes.
Kaustubha, right? Yeah. So I was raised Catholic, and I enjoyed it, and until I didn't want to go to Sunday school anymore because ski races were on Sundays, and so stopped going. But I got my first Holy Communion, and I didn't get confirmed because of skiing. And however, I love going to mass on Christmas Eve, and I still go with my
Oh,
family. And this year's Shami
midnight
Prasad.
mass.
Yeah, it's not midnight. I
Okay.
can't stay up that late. It's like at 7:30. It still feels late, but it's on Christmas Eve and it's snowing in quaint Vermont. It's beautiful. And I really, really resonate with um, it's a minister, with the minister. And this year, and he speaks about Jesus and in a way that I can relate to, also Mahaprabhu, right? So it's like I bring in a lens of seeing the similarities, right? And opening to that. And
Sure.
at the end of the mass service, we go down, and he was meeting Shamya Pras, and he like took Shamya's hands,
Your
and he
husband
looked my,
or
yeah,
husband to be, fiance.
yes, my
Okay.
husband to be. We're like 26 days away, Kaustubha, till you'll
All
be in
right.
Vermont.
I got to still
Um,
reserve my room. Ah,
we have it reserved, but yes,
okay.
we'll talk offline with that.
Okay.
We're not selling your room. Don't worry.
Okay. Good.
You're a top guest. So he
Okay.
took Shami's hands and he looked at him and he said, um, always remember we're in the same camp. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Because he knows that we're bhakti practitioners
That's
and
nice.
teachers, and my mom is close with this minister.
Right.
And he said I could feel the resonance of the two of you during the mass. And you know, we both love God so much. We're like, yes, we do. And but it was like this, he was so sincere in it. And I think that's why I'm drawn to him as a minister, because he also will speak to the universality of religion. And so we're all in the same camp,
That's great.
right? And if we can find bhakti anywhere,
Right.
any religion.
So Donal, I would say go ahead. This is something that you can keep an eye on. You didn't share how old your children are.
Yeah, I wonder.
Yeah, my guess is they're pretty young. That's the feeling that I got through it. And so,
I think.
yeah, I think if you can find spiritual activities that resonate with them, then go ahead and share that with them. And if you can also share deeper, I don't even want to say like deep, but in other words, in what sense the more detailed spiritual knowledge that comes in the Bhakti tradition, I think those are very appealing ideas about karma, ideas about reincarnation. Maybe if you share those ideas and incorporate them into the Christian ideas that they're getting or the Catholic ideas that they're getting, that may give them a very nuanced spiritual kind of idea as they're growing up. And then when they reach their teens, they're going to start to make decisions for themselves. They're going to start to see where their own faith goes, what makes most sense to them. And I think if you give them that background, you're giving them no matter what you do, even if you just brought them to Krishna temples and gave them straight up Krishna Bhakti, at a certain point, they're going to have to make a decision themselves.
Right.
And I think you're being sensitive to tuning that in a way that they remain enthusiastic rather than it seeming like a chore. I think that's a great idea. And they will have to make that decision. And if they see how bhakti is alive in your life, and if the ideas that come through the philosophy of bhakti, which are broadly appealing and makes such sense, then they may naturally kind of evolve to that or move in that direction on their own. So see how it goes. I was also going to share that if you do some more investigation, you may also be able to find Krishna-related events that they might be interested in. And one I was going to suggest is our Italy retreat that we do in the summer. We're doing it. It begins at the very end of June and goes into the first week of July. That's a place we bring lots of kids, and there's enough Italy and pizza and swimming and all of that kind of stuff to keep it fun for kids. And then there's lots of kirtan, but lots of nice people. Like I don't think it would seem like a chore to them. In other words, that
All right,
retreat.
and people they could relate to perhaps more,
Hopefully,
you
yeah,
know.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I
Okay,
wonder also if there's any bhakti for kids events specifically, so more for children in his area he could look into. Like we
maybe.
have a bhakti for kid. Melanie Pope leads a bhakti for kids here in Vermont in a way
Oh,
that
yeah,
that's very different than the kids show up very differently in that when they know it's for them versus when they come to a Sangha gathering.
sure, sure.
Maybe you could send him your presentation too, so he could figure out how to
Oh, yeah,
actually
that's a good idea.
share, how to share in
Yeah,
through to a kid.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to do that.
And there
Okay,
is the kids sage group now. The
there's a
Bhakti
Bhakti Kids
event
stage
might
with
be
that.
too soon, but
Yeah, that might be a bit much for them, but maybe down the road for them. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Donal. You
Thank
ready
you.
for the next
Donald.
question?
Yes.
Who's it
This
from?
is from Gabriella, aka Chapuji,
Okay, we got Chapo here today.
beloved Chapo.
Yeah.
Haribol familia, buenos dias.
Buenos dias,
I hope I
señorita
did okay with
Chapoji.
that. Thank you, dear Profess.
Profe. Profe.
Profe. Okay, thank you. Thank you, dear Profe, for continuing to guide us in keeping the main thing the main thing. I can hear her accent in my head while as I'm saying this. I wish I could speak like her. I love her voice. In a recent meeting with some of my Sage Group members, a question arose from a Venezuelan participant living in London for the
Okay.
first time and experiencing what she described as an intense winter. She asked, how does one cultivate equanimity in such unfavorable climate conditions where sunlight disappears for so long? During the winter, I witnessed how people changed both physically and emotionally, and the atmosphere even became depressive.
Mm,
Adding to her question and reflecting on it, I'd like to pose another. How do we harmonize the Samatvam Yoga Uchate from the Bhagavad-gītā, chapter 2, verse 48, with the above all always disturbed from the Srimad Bhagavatam,
okay.
canto 1, chapter 1, verse 10, question mark?
We'll share what she
What
means
she
by that
means by
change.
that. Okay. If yoga is defined by Sri Krishna as equanimity, but at the same time we live in an era where we are constantly disturbed, how do we achieve it? Gracia, Chapuji.
Okay. Thank you, Chabuji, for this question. And I could imagine for someone that has been born and raised in Venezuela, and then you move to London,
Oh man.
and then the winter sets in. So you're
Long
from this
gray
sunny
winter.
place. Yeah, and it's a fact. Sometimes it's interesting. I've looked at things like I don't know why, but sometimes in my feeds, maybe on Facebook or something,
Mhm.
I get these maps sometimes, and like they're maps that show like different things. Like it'll be a map of Europe, and it'll show like different questions. Like one of them was something like places where if you come into someone's home, they're going to feed you. All right. Like in other words, if for some reason you have to visit someone's house to
Yeah.
drop something off or pick something up or share something, whatever.
Hmm.
If you show up at someone's house in this country, what is the percentage of chance that they're going to feed you?
Oh,
Right.
cool.
Like they feel obligated, like it's part of their culture to feed you.
Right. I don't
And
get those kind of things on my Instagram feed. You're probably looking at
I don't know how I
more
get these things.
sophisticated.
And so then
Wow.
it would be like you'd see that like all the countries in Southern Europe, you
Mm,
know, um, well, Spain and Portugal and Italy,
Italy.
Greece, etc. Like these countries, like the percentage is very high. If you
Yep.
show up, they like, oh, hey, something to eat, sit down,
Mm,
and then we feed you. It's like it's kind of a natural, very warm,
yeah.
open,
Welcoming.
yeah, kind of mood. And then when you went into all the northern countries in Europe, it was like greatly reduced. That possibility
Mm,
that within that culture is the natural inclination to feed someone. It wouldn't even occur to them. India has that as well, where it's kind of like
yeah.
not only just come and have something to eat, but like stay here.
Yeah,
Stay,
you wash your feet and you can sleep in my
stay,
bed.
stay in my home. Yeah. So I'm sharing this, and there are other kind of questions like that too. Not just like will they feed you, but I've seen similar maps that seem to indicate that people that live in Southern Europe, that they naturally, whether they suffer from depression or rates of suicide or different things like that. I know that in the United States, I believe that the area that has a particularly high rate of suicide is like in the Seattle area,
Yeah,
which
a
is an
lot of
area.
rain
This is lots and lots of,
and
the
gray.
amount of number of days where it rains in the year are very high.
Hmm.
And so the gray skies and the constant rain, certainly it can have an emotional effect on people.
SAD, SAD, seasonal affective disorder. It's a real
Okay.
thing.
There you
It's
go.
a real
Seasonal.
thing. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So now it's interesting that where does the Bhagavad-gītā start? It begins with, Arjuna is expressing his own intense anxiety
Hmm.
that he's feeling. And when Krishna begins to speak to him, practically one of the first things, like the third verse practically that he speaks, Matra sparshas tu kaunteya, shitoshna shukadukada, agam ma payano nityas tam stitikshasva bharata. He says, "Oh Arjuna, happiness and distress, they come and they go. Just like the appearance and the disappearance of winter and summer, right? We know that winter comes, we know that summer is going to come behind it. He says that these arise from sense perception. When he says that these arise from sense perception, what he's meaning is that we look for happiness outside through the senses. We want to connect the senses to something external for our happiness. When you do that, because you're trying to connect with something external, which is composed of matter, the nature of matter is that it's always shifting. So it's sunny and then it's cloudy. It's hot and then it's cold. It's up and then it's down. It's here and then it's gone. That's the nature of matter. So this is just a fundamental aspect of knowledge, of spiritual knowledge, where we begin Bhagavad-gītā with, right? That if we're trying to find happiness through external things, enjoying external things through the senses, then we've tied ourselves to something that's going to shift. It's going to be hot and cold, bright and dark, et cetera, et cetera. And so then Krishna says, these arise from sense perception, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. Now, that's a huge clue for life. In other words, he's saying, learn to tolerate the externals. Learn to tolerate the shiftings of the externals, because there's nothing that you can do about it, right? And I like to share with people sometimes. I think I've shared it on the show before. But sometimes I've been sharing that. I've been speaking a lot. I've done a few teacher trainings. I've done 3 teacher trainings in the past week, basically.
Wow.
Yeah. But like
Amazing.
last weekend, this weekend, 2 this weekend, and 1 last weekend. Or was it last weekend, or it might have been the weekend before? But in any case. And I tell people that any one of us can have a deeply profound spiritual experience right now, at any moment, any time that we want to. And everybody kind of perks up like, oh, really?
Tell us.
Yeah, because it seems like some genuine, profound spiritual experience seems so elusive. You work so hard for it, you do all this practice and you try to, but really it's as simple as this. Just watch your mind. As an observer, look at your mind, look at your emotions and watch them pass through. Because the thing is, usually we feel that we are these emotions. We feel that I am happy, I am sad. The yogis realize, no, 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 no. It's your mind. Your mind is experiencing happiness. Your mind is experiencing sadness. If you step back from those emotions and observe them, then you are operating on the platform of the soul. You are operating on the platform of the spirit, observing matter. Observing what you thought was you, but isn't you. Your ever shifting mind. That is a real spiritual experience. That's a clue to your existence. Oh, that mind is not me. I'm the eternal spark of spirit that observes the mind, that operates through the mind. And I don't need to be governed by the mind. I don't need to be controlled by the mind. Because if I am, if I'm controlled by this machine or this computer of the mind that's connecting with the world through the senses, which are like a camera and a microphone, if I identify with that machine, and if my happiness is tied to the data that comes through the eyes and the ears and the skin, etc., then I am destined to go up and down. And if I'm in Venezuela in the winter, maybe it's a little easier on my emotions. And if I'm in London, maybe it's a little harder on my emotions. But either way, even in Venezuela, I will be going through ups and downs necessarily. There's going to be sunny days and cloudy days, both literally and metaphorically.
Right.
Um,
Wherever you go, there you are.
Yes, yeah. As long as you're attached to matter, it's going to shift. So Krishna begins by saying, but with this message, learn to tolerate that. How do you tolerate that? By going within. If grounding, this spiritual grounding, if I'm able to look at my mind from the spiritual perspective, and if I'm able to take a deeper interest in myself, not my mind or my senses, but myself. And if I spend my time focused on the self, whether it's through reading Bhagavatam and Bhagavad-gītā and contemplating or something, whether it's doing kirtan, which is not music just to satisfy my mind, but that is music for the self, for the soul, etc. If all my, if my actions and my activities and my focus becomes the self rather than the mind and the body, now I'm grounded in something that's stable, right? And so Krishna, in the following verse, Krishna says, O Arjuna, O best among men, Arjuna, the person who is not disturbed by happiness and distress and is steady in both is eligible for liberation, right? So if you can go within and connect with that, I get it. I get what you're saying. You know, it's always another interesting experience.
What?
In perspective. Is when you fly out of an airport on a rainy day, right?
Yeah.
Right, because even the rain is kind of depressive and dark, and airports are just kind of like, particularly when you're out on the runway, it's just like there's all this just loud, crude machinery, and it looks like, oh God, working here would be terrible. You're walking around in the rain out there on that, with this
Loading the bags.
Loading the bags, or like directing the run. You're walking around and you get these incredibly loud planes are driving around. There's oil all over the place, and you're out on this runway. And a lot of times the airports are in crummy parts of the city, and the whole thing looks depressing. And then you take off, and at a certain moment you break through the clouds, and suddenly it's a beautiful, brilliant, bright day.
Yeah.
Just on the other side of those clouds. And it kind of makes you realize, like, oh, the sun is always shining. It's always bright. It's always luminous. I just occasionally find myself underneath the clouds, right? And just being reminded of that as you rise above the clouds is an interesting experience, and it is something that gives us the capacity to realize that my emotions are like these clouds that float by one moment and then they're gone, or that I can intentionally rise above at any moment. Because the sun of the soul is always shining. It's just that we're not facing it. We're looking at the mind instead, But the sun of the soul, the brilliance of the soul, the luminosity of the soul, the warmth of the soul, our true nature is always there. We are just not focused on it. We learn to become focused on it by, one, tolerating the shifts in matter, even the emotional shifts that are tied to the shifts in matter. When in one sense we have to learn to not grant them the importance that we grant them. To us, it's everything. Our emotions are everything. But when we say those emotions are not me, those emotions are shifts in the mind that are tied to shifts in the external matter, and they are not me. That's the beginning of spiritual progress. That's the beginning of yoga, right? That's the start. And so I get it. You move to London and there's a long winter. Winter's long up there in Vermont too, although you like winter.
It is. I was thinking that you have to find some way to be outside and enjoy the winter in order to not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the winter
You
and the snow.
what you're saying is true too. In other words, on a practical level, not on a
Yeah,
philosophical level, but just like uh, there are ways that like you need to get out, even on the cloudy days. You need to
exactly.
get out and move around and hopefully breathe some decent air
Take
and
vitamin D supplements and
ideally,
the vitamin G gratitude.
okay. Although that vitamin D is hard to come by in the winter in cloudy places, I suppose.
Right, you can take a supplement.
Okay.
I take my naturopath told me to take like a liquid supplement vitamin D because
Okay.
there just isn't as much sun.
And
It's
when the sun is out there, go out and get it. Not
Mhm.
just it'll help you emotionally, but also because it has a physical effect. That vitamin D actually does have an emotional. Does it have an emotional
Yeah,
connection?
it's
Yeah.
connected to your emotions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So do the practical, but also on the spiritual level, try to develop this focus. Try to remember you're not these emotions.
They're
Try to
part of the
remember
experience.
that the happiness and distress that are tied to externals will always be shifting, and try to remember that there's something steady, something luminous, something warm, something beautiful that is always there. Just like we don't know that the sun is there on a cloudy day, but we do know actually it's there. We need to remind ourselves that it's there.
Mhm.
So we need to remind ourselves of our own nature. And the more that we focus on it, the more that we transcend it. You'll find as one begins to advance spiritually and really finds a spiritual mission in their life.
Mm.
Like, and if that mission, and when I say mission, it's not necessarily just external mission, but your own personal spiritual mission. How I want to advance spiritually, step by step. When your own spiritual mission becomes prominent in your life, you'll find that it lights up your life, and that
Yeah.
even cloudy, like literal cloudy days, as well as metaphorically cloudy days, you know, that it kind of brightens them up, or it doesn't affect you, it doesn't rock you, it doesn't disturb you, because you're focused, and you're focused on something that gives life, and that's spirituality. So I get it, Chapuji, and for I believe this was a Sage Group member that you mentioned,
Yeah, it was.
that wrote this in. Uh, Try to take this experience of having shifted to another place in the world that has this long, cloudy winter. Try to see it as an opportunity for your own growth, for your own something that can even the dark things can stimulate us to look within. Try to see it as like, okay, the world just sent me a lesson that the material world is not going to be bright and sunny all the time. And
Mhm.
that I'm going to have to find ways to be bright and sunny all the time, and the external things will not provide it. So I'm going to have to look within. See it as the world's special way, the universe's special way of nudging you forward to find a more meaningful happiness that's not tied to the weather, but that's uncovered, as your own true nature. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, Kaustubha, I really love how you named that being able to witness that in happening in your own mind is a profound spiritual experience. Right.
It,
And
it
it's not just people think like the clouds part and I'm going to see God and
right.
that's when I'm awakened. Right.
Yeah.
And maybe for some that will be their experience. But for most of us, it's this awareness, this
Yes.
self-awareness that can be so profound.
Yeah, and what to speak of when we come to Krishna. It gets so more
Yeah.
exciting then. But that's it. But it begins with understanding. I'm not this body. I'm not this mind. And you can
Mhm.
realize that just by looking at the mind.
Mhm.
All right, that's it for today. We will be back tomorrow at the same time at 7 p.m. Eastern.
AM, 7 a.m.
7. Did I say p.m.?
Yeah.
7 p.m. Eastern. Look forward to being with you all. We'll have more Q&A. And let's all wish the best to Raghu and the band as they're on the road.
We miss
Do we still
them.
have Road Rage with
I don't
us?
know. Let's see.
Has he disappeared? I think he's maybe gone. Yeah, I don't see it.
I don't see
Okay.
him either.
Yeah. Okay. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. We'll see you tomorrow. And as Raghunath always says, it's a beautiful day for a beautiful day, even if it's cloudy. And let the
Cool.
magic flow. See you tomorrow. Mwah.